I'm saying is that the human factor is very, very important. We saw that in Ukraine, where, frankly, I have been a skeptic about the Ukrainian success in this war. I honestly believed from the start, I think I've been on one of your shows, and I did express that the better the Ukrainians accept the loss of some territory than kill themselves trying to regain territory from a force that is plainly going to grind them to bits. But the Russian side underestimated the human factor and underestimated Ukrainian resistance, just as Hamas today has underestimated Jewish and Israeli resistance. The fact of the matter is, Hamas believed that about 200 odd hostages, plus the horrible things that they did, would ensure, and of course, all the videos that they're streaming. And there's a tremendous disinformation campaign that must have been planned for months and months. This particular campaign would have taken at least 6 to 8 months to plan. And unfortunately, Netanyahu gave them the excuse by having some individuals in the Jewish fringe march all across the Al Aqsa Mosque, which was, a huge strategic error, a huge psychological and tactical error. And that gave Hamas the excuse to launch its plan, believing that the Muslim world will be behind it. Now, I know this is not going to be popular, just as my Ukraine thing was not popular in the last session, but I frankly don't believe the Iranians have any stomach to get into this. I frankly don't believe Hezbollah has any stomach to get into this. And I am praying that it remains confined to Hamas and the IDF. And I'm praying that, that by no means there is a situation created in which it is assumed that Iran is interfering when I don't think it is. Hezbollah is playing an active role when I don't think it is. So far, there have been only, what what we call naam ke vaste, namesake activities on that particular border. I'd like to keep it that way while the problem of Hamas is dealt with. And I firmly believe that in this war, the IDF will prevail. Why? Because the Jewish people have been through an attempted Holocaust before. They know what it is, and they're not going to allow this to happen a second time around. It's never going to happen, I can tell you. And that is where the human factor has not been taken into account by Hamas. So even if the whole world, even if the United States tells them stop, 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 the IDF is not going to stop until it has finally taken care of the problem that is caused by an organization of terrorists that has explicitly, when it was founded, 85, if I'm not mistaken, explicitly implied that the Jewish people do not have a right to exist. You remember in the 20th century, there was an organization that believed the same thing. And now you have Hamas explicitly saying that, and you have apologists for Hamas appearing. I mean, in Canada, for example, there are more pro-Hamas marches in Canada than in the Gaza Strip, in Australia, in the United States, in the United Kingdom. I mean, what is happening? This is the kind of illusion that you have about what I call the Sino-Wahhabi alliance. And this is why, from a long time, I've been saying the Wahabis and the Sino, by which Sino, I don't mean the Chinese people, I mean the CCP leadership. That particular alliance, is really, underestimating the resilience of certain people. And definitely, I think, the resilience of the Jewish people and the resilience of the state of Israel. No matter what the mistakes Israel made in the past, whatever, the resilience of that people cannot be underestimated. And it's my view that the IDF will break the back of Hamas in this operation, because they know if they don't, once again, Hamas is going to come after them, and worse, 10 other organizations are going to become what Hamas has become, because they're incentivized by the failure of the IDF to break the back of Hamas. Just as India went in and liberated Bangladesh from genocide in 1971, when Kissinger was asking the US and China, they were begging the Chinese to send their troops and sending the 7th Fleet into India, we went ahead, into the Indian Ocean, we went ahead and liberated Bangladesh. The Israelis will go ahead and liberate the people of Gaza, because the people of Gaza are the real hostages. They are being held hostage. The Palestinian people, you look at them anywhere in the world, they are very, very they're brilliant. They're very, very good. They can be tremendous contributors to the globe, but they're not being allowed to do so in Gaza by the Hamas. They're going to be liberated in Gaza. I'm very, very certain. The IDF will do that liberation. This, if no matter what the pressure. So what I'm trying to say is, the good news is that they have underestimated the human factor, and the human factor, the pull of democracy, the pull of freedom, the pull of seeing a multicultural society. Now, you've seen in China, an effort is made to basically, convert into, I wouldn't even say Hanize, because it's different from the Chinese have evolved a culture entirely different in many respects from the traditional Han culture. But make everybody that same culture, whether you're Uyghur, whether you're Tibetan, whether you're Manchurian, whether you're Mongolian, everybody will be that culture. And yet you have in countries in the world a very multicultural situation. India has about 200 million Muslims, and we're happy and proud about them. So that example gives an inner strength to the population that I think has not been factored in by the Sino-Wahhabi alliance.
Well, I want to get to something you touched upon, because this is in your book, and you talk about how, like, there's different societies or different government leaderships in history that have been racist in different ways. You argue that the CCP is racist, but racist in a more advanced way than the Nazis were racist. Could you explain that a little bit?
Well, I'd like to say that I don't believe that the Han description is a completely DNA based, ethno based description. It's more of an assimilation and a culture. Now, I know, for example, families in China where you have ladies, for example, who have married Indian men and who have settled in China and who are living happily in China and have produced children. And the children are completely, Sinicized in the communist way. They're very happy in China and they regard themselves as totally Chinese. Now, of course, the Indian fathers also, they become admirers of the Chinese people. Well, the Chinese are a wonderful people. So, frankly, the Germans had this ridiculous notion of ethnicity that you had, and that is the same notion that the British used to partition India. That the Muslims and Indians were two different nations, two different ethnicities, two different DNAs, which is absurd. Now you look at, for example, Ashkenazi Jews. Whereas if you look at the difference, the DNA difference, there is really nothing except from the pseudo laboratories of the Nazis and pseudo experiments by Mengele and Himmler and people like that. So they had a very narrow ethno-based, situation. And if I may say so, they were taught their lesson. And I would refer you to some of the speeches made by Joseph Stalin, because when the Soviet Union started prevailing by 1943 in World War II, he started mocking the Germans. Oh, these are the superior people. These are the Übermensch. They use some Russian word for that. And we are the Untermensch, the lower, lesser breed. He used some Russian word for that, very sarcastically. And look where they are, hundreds of thousands of them surrendering. What has happened to these superior people? What has happened to them in the hands of these inferior people? And there are several speeches of Stalin in which he has basically praised the Russian spirit. And, and the Germans regard the Russians as subhuman. And they could slice through Russia. Thanks to Stalin's strategic mistakes, especially his culling of the generals. All the good generals were culled because of a German conspiracy to make Stalin believe that the best generals were basically German agents when they were the best fighters against Germany. By 1942, Stalin realized his mistake. By middle of 1942, he got all the generals who were still alive in prison camps back, put them into work, and the Germans started losing ground after that. But what I want to say is that they're not racist in the traditional Western sense of racism. For example, you got white racism, let's say. That people say that just because, you come from you're less pigmentation, you are of different breed than people who have more pigmentation, let's put it that way. And I'd like to say that my experience in the United States, frankly, even back in the in the days when there was supposed to be racism. I mean, early 90s or even earlier in the South, for example, Alabama, Tennessee, Georgia. Once they understood that you spoke a little bit of English, once they understood that you knew a little bit, you know, possibly a bit more than they on some other matters, I can assure you their behavior changed very significantly. And the Indian community in the United States, we look at the Indian community in terms of skin color. I mean, I would say in many respects, I mean, on average, possibly uh, even darker than some other communities in the United States. But the Indian community today is, in per capita terms, bigger in terms of per capita income than the even the Jewish communities, the Japanese American communities. Forget the other Caucasian communities. So, frankly, uh, I don't think, I mean, frankly, that there are some white racists in the United States, but it's not as serious a problem as people make it out to be. And where this is very important now. You go back to my writing. I think in 2020, you will say that how I've said about how the internet space is being intruded into by the CCP in America and India in particular to widen the fringes. You have the white fringes, the anti-white fringes, the Hindu fringe, the anti-Hindu fringe, and shrink the moderate middle. And the same thing is happening in the United States. And what you're seeing now is a kind of the fringes tearing at each other and trying to grow and trying to expand at the expense of the moderate middle in these two societies. And you're looking at internet silos. And we all have a habit of going into silos that we like and getting more and more convinced that we are in the right. If you believe that America is a land of white races, you go into that silo, you get more belief. If you believe America is a land of opportunity, you go into that silo, you believe that. This is the CCP is active in doing this. And I don't believe any of the internet platforms, frankly, are aware of this problem. I don't believe any of the internet platforms are dealing with this problem sufficiently. And that's why you have this tremendous penetration of the internet space and the social media conversation space by entities that essentially objectively support a CCP agenda of division in the democracies.